Okay, so we are back. I think you can hear me, and I think we are recording, right? I think. So this is, actually, I prepared this lecture for 5th year, but then I've been using it for 2nd year, and I didn't update. So for those who already saw it, it is a kind of a reminder. It's about what is program about, and what tools do we have to define a program. The illustration of the cover is Monticello building by Jefferson. And this is an archaeologist analysis, kind of doing the program backwards. It is just checking how the spaces are related. This is what they call a topological, so how the spaces are connected to each other independently of their shape and size. And currently that analysis helps archaeologists to understand how society works, how the family is organized, how servants relate to the owners, and so on. And the same technique is used for archaeologists doing excavations of primitive or not so primitive societies. By watching the connection of the rooms and the remainings, of course, the tools there, they can have a lot of information on how societies worked. Why do I say this? Well, this is because that demonstrates that the buildings, the space, are a consequence of how people relate, how people live. So if we know how people live, what people need, and the kind of relations we have, that will translate into the building. And that's what we do with defining the program. Not only having a list of the spaces and sizes of the spaces, which is what we usually say by the program, but also to see which kind of relations they have among themselves. And that is one of the layers we need to make a design, because in the end, buildings are not making just only one outside, one exterior image. It's about organizing a set of spaces. So let's continue. Actually, programming is something which we borrow from computer science, and this is the and also from industrial design. This is a diagram of fabrication of an industry, of the materials, how they move around, and we copied their way of working. This was very much a modern movement, right? Also, it started earlier. Modern architects in the 1910s, 1920s, even before, were fascinated with engineers, and they tried to copy some of their process to apply to a new way of doing architecture. So we owe a lot of the tools we have now to industrial design. I put one example. This is Spanish. I use this because it is very simple. I should have something in English, but this is this is the production process. Right? So you need to have which kind of product you need, the materials you need to use, which activities you need to create those products. That makes a diagram on how materials and activities relate. With that, you can calculate how much space you need, then how much space you have. This is very much architectural limitation. And then you can, with this kind of a diagram of which activities you need to assemble those materials, the spaces you need, and the space you have, you may make a diagram of the spaces and sizes already. Then you have external factors, things like could be like the need of natural light or silence or proximity to access to roads and so on. Practical limitations, because not site is ideal. So depending on the site, you will have a limitations you cannot consider. And then altogether makes to make one proposal. In this case, it is alternatives, because there's not one perfect one. And then you will choose the one you think is better. You will evaluate, you will select. Probably with the evaluation, you might need to reconsider back and to redo, but then you select the one which is better and then just do it. Architecture is no different. right? And this is a very clear process on how we decide what is the set of spaces we need in a building. But of course, from the beginning, we need to know the needs, right? Otherwise, you cannot put any building. And then we need to know the possibilities, right? In our case, we know we have a limitation of a space. We saw before, we cannot make a huge building. It's the building we have, and we have some margin to add space. So that's the how much we have, and it's almost fixed. We have a flexibility. So the possibilities is almost there. Also the limitations, because the site is what it is, but the needs, right? The needs is something that we need to define very clearly. So this is the adjacency matrix, is a way of telling how spaces should be more or less related to each other. This comes from industrial design, but this comes also to architectural schools. And I must tell you, I have to include this because it's this standard procedure. This is a tool that several BIM programs have. So it's nice you know it, but I must tell you, I never in my life used it. I have done diagrams for very complex buildings, but I never went to this, and I didn't find it so useful. But so you can use it if you want or not. This is one tool we have. And in this case, it is telling like 6 levels of connections between the spaces, between being absolutely necessary they are together, to being totally unwanted to be together. So they should be as separate as possible, and anything in between, right? In architecture, in industry, you have this. In architecture, probably is 3-4 levels, depends. One very typical case is to have the toilet, the dining room. This is something you see very often in apartments here in Korea, in old villas, but of course, you don't want to eat watching the toilet or hearing the toilet. So this is 2 uses which should be separated, right? For example. So this tells you about how things should be together. So here you have offices should be far away from very noisy activities. Actually, the offices should be away from everywhere in this case. But some activities should be near the storage, right? So you see by every pair the kind of relation they must have, and that will tell you already how you might divide in groups those activities of that building. So adjacent matrix, interesting tool. I never used it. I didn't feel it necessary, but it is a standard procedure. Then once you have it, you will have your activities, right? So you will find that some activities, we have 4 lines. This is the ones which should be together as much as possible, having a backbone. Of course, you can understand this is the production process. And then you have like a secondary program which linked to that backbone, and then others which are more or less isolated, where you could have even another layer. And those lines express those connections. So you have to be sure that important spaces are connected. You have to make sure that the backbone of activities is really well linked, but they have those others as you need them. Of course, offices are just in this case at the end of the process, right? Imagine the museum, you have all the exhibition rooms with a very clear connection, but then you won't have the toilet next to an exhibition room. So you may have kind of lobby, which tells you to the circulation space, and then from the lobby you may have a space to toilets or to cafeteria or so on. You don't have other things in the exhibition room. This is the mean of this kind of thing. Bubble diagram is more common. Again, it is not a requirement. Sometimes it is helpful because you can devise more how you link the spaces without designing. Right? You still have no size, no shape. So this is a useful tool because you can start thinking program while in parallel you are doing other things, right? In this case, in the industry, you will try to have minimum distance and minimum crossing, so circulation is easy. In complex buildings, we should have the same. The principles are very much the same. Then, when you have these connections decided, is when you add the spaces. So now you have the size, and then we start little by little finding the logical position of that in what would be a real building, right? In this case, we assume it is a single floor, but this could happen in several floors. Then we would have an additional vertical circulation. This is just a simplification for you to understand the process. So sizes come later, and many architects work in this way, and in school, sometimes it's a requirement. I just give it as an option for you if you feel it necessary. In this semester, we have a pretty complex plan, so probably this will be helpful. So much for industry. Then you would have to the shape. I found many books in the library. This is examples in English. You will have in Korean also in our science library, and most of them are from interior. Curiously, this includes stair design. I said stairs are extremely important. If you see the diagrams before, that importance of the circulation is even more critical in vertical circulation because the points are very much limited. You cannot have too many stairs in a building. So the correct position and size of one stair is critical. And that will make your design much easier or much more difficult or totally impossible in some cases. The stair and elevator, of course, they go together. This is part of the same vertical communication. So if you see this in the building, you can see how important it is. And actually, it is part of the illustration of the cover. Well, this is one example. You have more. In this case, you have, for example, an example of a university career counseling center. And this is the spaces. Usually you interview the university people, you see other examples. So this is like a client plus case studies. So you will see other universities and see how they work, but that specific university may have a specific number of employees working there. So you try to apply those too. In our case, we have the case studies. The client we have to figure out, right? We have to make up of him. But again, this is part of the architect's work. And for each of the spaces, in this case, they have the need of a space, which they leave open because they do not know yet. What we saw before, what should be next to there or not. In this case, they put 7 levels, right, which is even more complex than the others. And some other conditions which may help you to control the design, like public access, daylight, privacy, if you need plumbing, if you need water inside, other specific equipment, and other things which may be requested by the client, right? So you need, for example, some space which is a coffee station, convenient for everybody. So you might not need privacy there because it's public space, but it should be easy to access, for example. And you want to have daylight because there's some place where people rest there, and you need to have a pleasant space. So even though for industry, we just had those spaces, size, and adjacency, for architecture, we have many more things we can consider, right? And it depends on us. And we can put in a table, and you see, you can do this independently of the formal design process. So it doesn't stop you from moving forward. Then this is more examples. This is from the handbook. So they are giving you like options on how much you may discuss with the client or discuss with yourself to make these spaces important. So of course, acoustics, if some of you are thinking on library or theater, you have to have at least one mentioned acoustics. Lighting, always, natural light should be used as much as we can, but we have to consider also artificial lighting, the night lighting, of course, color, finishing of materials, floor, walls, environmental qualities in terms of, again, control of noise from the outside, how much heating you need, if it can be of half exterior space and so on. And future factors is interesting if something should be considered open for the future. And this is just examples, right? I think you can. I was always speaking. Okay. In things you can consider into the design. Again, this is an example, again, for another case. This is like a office project, and you have their employees and their own departments, and they're telling you what they want. This is the company telling you, this is what we want. This is the size we consider. This is some requirements, and then required minimum furniture and so on. This is for management, this accounting and so on. So in corporations, you may get some people doing this, or if you work in a big company, you may be required to make this study. I never did, but sometimes in a very simplified way, we do for very, very complex or very specific projects. Right, so this is, again, like additions about other factors in technical things. Then this is interesting because how do we know the area of the spaces? So if you're doing a house, of course, probably you may know that a single room, maybe 7 square meters, nice room for 1 or 2 people will be 10, but it's better 12 square meters. Over 12 square meters, a large room, and so on. So you may be familiar with sizes, but in an office or a museum or a classroom or any other spaces you're not familiar with, you have to check if things work. How you do it? By using elements you know. So you know the space you need to access to a wash basin. You need the space for 1 toilet, right? For ladies, for men. So even though you don't have the design, you may think that a toilet, minimum toilet for people may fit in a given space. Same for a small apartment for the, let's say, the housekeeper, only guy, right? Or small seminar rooms as we have in the school. And this is what we did for the 7th floor. So you know the space you need in a table, you need the space to move around. So the minimum space for a seminar room, you might change that and you may adjust. But this kind of checking with furniture, abstract spaces, will give you an idea on how much space you need for each. And you have kind of image. Also, probably in the end, you do it totally different. So this kind of a checking with the number of people, right? Plus furniture. And the furniture size is something you should know. If you don't know, you can check, or you can go to the handbooks. We have plenty. And I think I put in the references a lot of metrics. So you know the size for a wash machine, for a toilet, for a kitchen, for a bed, for a sofa, for a theater seat, whatever. So you know this size of furniture. You know also with the metrics the space people need to move around. So with this, you can have a guess of the space you need for each activity. Then you can make it bigger, smaller, or differently. The other thing you have to guess is by looking at other projects, right? Again, this is the case study. So you go to another office and you see how much they use for the kitchen, how much they use for, how they solve the housekeeper apartment, or how big are the seminar rooms. So you can go to the 7th floor and see our seminar rooms for 15 people, how big they are, and so on. And then you have some kind of a knowledge of the space you need for each thing. That's important, and I insist on this. This is something we do very often when we are not familiar with the spaces we are designing. And so on, right? And you go for alternatives. So how can you have 4 people working different ways, right? How you can have a small administration office or larger administration office, or a director room, and so on. So that will give you the information you need to go beyond and make the program area. Of course, I add this. Those who studied Studio 1 and 2 with, especially Studio 1 with Professor Yoon Jung, surely they had a lot of time working in kitchens. Probably we don't have kitchen unless you make a restaurant, but maybe we do not detail so much. But kitchens are a small nightmare, and you have to really be careful. So even though the owners may make their own kitchen, for restaurants, you have to always follow the chef. And if the restaurant changes the chef, they will change the kitchen also. So restaurants are very specialized, but for houses, you need to be very, very aware. So this information is important, not only the sizes, but how people move around for cooking. And then with that information, you're able to complete this column, the size. And again, this is the desirable ideal size that you can adjust depending on the possibilities you have in the site. When we work in an existing building, as in our case, sometimes we may have to stuff things a little bit or sponge things a little bit because we have too much space or too little, but it should be around the ones we see which are reasonable for what we want to use, or what we need to use in this building. Right. And then if you want, you can add the adjacency metrics to compare things, and then you go back to the bubble diagram we know. And in this case, they have already an idea of the sizes, so they're going beyond, but you see they look for alternatives, and they are telling you if they have probably just like a natural light somewhere with views and so on. And then by trying, you get like the most logical output, and then you will be able to, this was acoustic privacy. So you have a legend to express. See how things are very graphic always. There's nothing, nowhere a thesis, only the initial layers, but still you have a table where you have all your data together. We try to write as little as possible because architects are very visual and we need to see things, right? We leave the texts for the lawyers and the historians. They like to have a lot of this, but we are graphic people. And then, as we did with the factory, in this case, they have existing space, and it is where you have to adapt that bubble diagram, and you see for the alternatives and see which one works better. This is more familiar, so I will not talk much more here, right? One more example for another book in the library from interior design. In this case, I chose because they have very nice graphics. This is from the hand drawing era. It is a book of the 80s, 90s. We can do the same with computer, but you can see that having nice graphics and clear helps a lot to be consistent about. So this is Eco Toys. This is for a toy company. And you have what we call the concept, right? The already space requirement. Here we have only 3 levels of adjacency. And one important thing, the president must be in contact with everything. This is like the condition of design. And you see, just 4 graphics give you a huge amount of information. Also look for the lettering. For those who have problems, it's very nice to use clear, systematic lettering without much effort, but this gives a very much arranged, clean, neat, and presentable presentation for a client or for a competition or for the school, right? Rather than this kind of disorganized and clumsy high school writing. So nice in terms of graphics and expression of ideas. Then this is already known. I don't use this at all, but this kind of conditions and so on is interesting, and you can have it to summarize what you need. Then is the summary, again, adjacencies, and okay, how many people use it, and so on, right? And then, as we said, you check the individual spaces by just knowing the people who is using them, the furniture, and of course, you have to have an idea of the activity. So we all have some idea of what is a meeting room or a seminar room, but for some other places, you need to find out or to speak to the client what they do. Well, model shop, right? We use very often. So you can think what's your ideal model shop and maybe doing better than this. And you see, always we work with dimensions. And with this, you have also the different possibilities for the working places. The bubble diagram, again, with those connections in the existing space, alternatives, and finally, the layouts, right, in the plan. Look again, this is working drawings, but you have a nice lettering, not final presentation, and always the basic dimensions, and then you put the questions you have. Always having furniture helps to show the scale of the space and give a hint of the use. How it works, well, you have the different options. And finally, this is a floor plan in which, again, see how the floor design helps the concept, right? So in here, this, okay, we have some flooring which gives this idea of centrality. Even though you are scattered around, actually gives a nice entrance, but guys use the building and gives you a hint that something happens in the other side. Well, this can be better or worse, but interior elevations. This is something we should do at least in the most important spaces of our building. Not everybody reaches that point, but as I insist always, we say architects are creators of spaces for people to do some activity. And this is the interior, what we create. The exterior, of course, is the image of the city is important because we create urban spaces, but come on, the interior is where people will spend their time. It's where we have to make the effort to make something great. And great architects, Le Corbusier, Wright, Mies van der Rohe, I don't know about Park Ingles because he has people doing things for him, but you will find they have always all the interior elevations, of course, the furniture and the detailing of all those doors and tables and so on in their projects. So this is the final plan. Also, this is interesting because this is a presentation panel. So you have a very detailed floor plan, but you have a stronger final concept with that central element, not such a clumsy circle. You have those images which give you the idea what they're looking for, 2 diagrams to explain the concept, and very small amount of text just for the necessary. 90% is graphic. Right. Of course, scale, and you see all the annotations you need everywhere, so you know what is what. You can avoid this if it is not necessary, but you have to give a title to each drawing and give the keywords, of course, north, scale, and the one thing missing is the design company, right? Company, the date, always. But in even a very graphic presentation, which is 90% graphic, you need always to annotate the basics so people know what is what. And the beautiful thing is to give the image of that. So now we understand much better. This is an open space in which actually the departments are like small buildings within the building, and you have a sequence of views. Please always plan your work. We're speaking planning for the end of June or mid of June, when you have a final presentation, to include in your plans the visualization of the interior spaces, the important ones. Perspective, axonometric, both, model photos, Rhino model, both together, whatever. But the moment the client, the moment the competition jury, the moment your professors see this, we understand if you are really aware, if you really control what you are doing. This should be always together with the floor plan, sections, elevations, of course. That's the basic. But please plan to have everything together. Okay. So this is an example from a university. I think it's first year students. They published it, so I took it. A house programming in Tennessee is kind of southern state, so it's a nice climate area. So this is the program for a house, and probably the way of living in Tennessee is not the same in Korea. So probably the house organization is not the same as in Seoul. But you have a very normal diagram of spaces of uses and needs. Then you have the adjacency matrix. In this case, they have 4 levels. This is exercise. Again, I insist, I never used it, but I know it exists and I could use it, and my software usually does it, but usually my memory is enough. Then you have this kind of result with real dimensions of what could be the result you see for this kind of 4 spaces. You don't need so much diagramming, but okay, you can have the large areas. Then of course you have to give an image and make the final design, which is a bit more complex. Nice drawing. And you see here, they didn't go so far, but the rooms are correctly dimensioned. The living room is okay. Probably sofas are a little bit small. And I don't buy it because the Americans are quite big in general. But well, it's nice drawing, and you have a lot of terrace, a lot of exterior space, which probably works or not. This is the end works, not something to copy, but it is for you to see how this is a usual exercise in design schools, universities. And then, as we commented, archaeology does the opposite. So they see the resulting buildings, and just by watching, well, the sizes are obvious, but watching the spaces and how they're connected, they get surprisingly huge amount of information on how those societies worked and were organized, which is surprising. And this tells this building is really based on a way of life. I wonder what archaeologists would say if they see our apartments. So we are ending, so I promise to be short. What we saw are just the basic tools. And see, there's not feeling, there's not emotion here. It's just pure mechanical thing, because we copied the system, we borrowed the system from the industrial design, from the factories, which are 100% practical. But those tools have demonstrated to be useful, and they are standard. So you have to know them. Then you're free to use more or less them. Do not think you have to come with your matrices and so on. But you have to think that a room, as you saw, is much more than just a number of square meters and a name. You have to see how it is used. You have to figure out the furniture, the use, the live inside. You have to see beyond just those things in the plan. You have to think on the character, as we said, natural light, silence, near to other rooms, how things are assembled, and that's already designing, going beyond what's a plan. But the diagram is not all, and I quote from Kahn, right? Telling a building is just a society of rooms. And it's a beautiful comparison, because society is us. Society is made of individuals, and think of a studio class as a small subset of society. This is your 3rd studio. So you have had a basic studio 1, basic studio 2, design studio 1, design studio 2, design studio 3 is your 5th studio. And even though you're the same and your classmates change, just each studio by those individuals being different, the studio is different, right? By just small changes in the individuals. And that's what makes a society, right? In this case, rooms are people, right? Individuals, and society is that connection. So each room needs to be treated individually, needs to be known, treated or studied with care. Right? It's not just one division we put in the plans to make this building as a society, to have a personality, right? This is what the text says. And this, for example, my Studio 8 of a few years ago, this was a field trip to Andong, and it was the hell to make this photo because they all jumped in different times. So they had to jump until they died. But you can see they're all similar age. They are all, yeah, same country, same major. So this should be quite similar, but every guy jumped in a different way. They show very different personalities. Right, and I think it's what is beautiful. In a building, we should have all the rooms jumping with their own individuality, but all have this kind of a group this kind of consistency, that coherency of the, this is clear, this is a group, and they are very good friends. Actually, they graduated quite a long time ago, but they are all still in touch and don't hate each other, which is nice. You have to try to have this image in mind. Our buildings, basic elements, those rooms are extremely important. And this is the basis. But then we have to achieve a very compact complex. What happens if we don't do it, if we go to the mechanical way? So if we forget that, we don't have a society, we have just a diagram without spirit, without character. And I chose this image. This is a fantastic decoration from, I think it's Metropolis. This 1920s movie, very dark. If you didn't see it, I think you can find it on the internet. If you saw already, see it again. It is a very negative view of the future. But this was like the workers' area of that dystopia, that kind of negative, horrible future devised in a society in which individuals had not personality. They were all with the same same clothes, just waiting for the bell to tell them when to move and go to work and go back to sleep and then go back to work. This kind of almost robotic life. You see, they are looking down and so on. We hate it. And this was a warning we got almost 100 years ago from the movies. But curiously, we understand perfectly this is not the society we want. But 90% of the projects we have at the school and outside the school are like this. Buildings are abstract division in plan of just rooms with the area required and not any care on what it will result. We use standard materials, we use good colors, we use good quality windows, whatever, and we hope the users will put their plants and their paintings and the decoration and it will work. But this is a lot of just wishful thinking, and it's like reducing the task of the architect to just making a diagram of the building, not the building itself. We cannot always detail everything to the minimum size, to the smallest element, but look at the masters, look at the great pieces of architecture and see how much care they have in even the smallest part of it, as we saw with the Asplund crematorium or the Göteborg City Hall, in which the handles were individually designed for that specific building, thinking on what is the feeling, what's the sensation of putting the hand on the handle, and what is the movement of opening the door. So every moment you use this building, you have this kind of very much, I don't know, strong sensation, and now I speak of sensations and impressions of the building being very much part of your life, not being yourself adapting to an industrially made thing, which is just repeated over and over and over. So this is the two sides of programming which you are aware of, and I think this is the last slide. So now you are free to leave, but before you run away, let me stop sharing. Wow, everybody awakened. Nobody's sleeping. Great. It was short enough. I didn't want to be very short, and I think that's very clear. So there's not much mystery here, but it's important, whatever. Give me 1 second to check the syllabus, so I'm sure I don't miss anything. So for next week, which are already in the third week, we'll have again lecture. We have to complete the research of the building. Let's postpone a little bit more research one. So research one, which is and two, let's move it to Friday. Right, we are a little bit short of time. So that means case study is almost done, I think, at least for the assignments. As I commented, we'll have to add more case studies and go back as we define the project. But existing building analysis and site analysis, we have to really organize well. One more thing, I will share the screen. So the site visit is already approved, right? While we were having a rest, Miss Che Yun-shil from the office was very helpful. She sent the letter and they replied. So Tuesday, 16th, I think, 2 p.m., we all meet at the artist house. We need to bring our masks, of course, and your camera. It's not German. Camera. Of course, you can use your smartphone and sketchpad. And you can bring your measuring tape. I don't think we can measure inside, but I wish we are very careful on how the structure shows inside and what is the perception of the size and the scale of the spaces, right? So we have not such an abstract idea as we have now of the building, which is based mostly on plans. So as we go to the building, we have to, oh, it's almost our friend. So we have to meet Mr. Lee Tae-gun. Tae-gun, not Tae-gun. And this is the manager. So it is the guy who will take us around, right? Then when we get out, probably we have some kind of outside activity. And then we will see how we can find a place or a moment for me to give your daily doses of scolding, because you need a chancery to move around. Okay, so see you Tuesday in the Yusulkayo chip. And please work like crazy. I see some of you are working a lot. Some of you are getting more and more behind. So try to organize yourselves to have this in control, because 2.5 more weeks, we have to have already the first presentation with already initial proposal for the building. Any question, Chilmun?
Professor?
Yes.
The research one due today is Friday. So we have to combine all materials we did in one PPT.
Let me go back. I will share the syllabus. Okay, so we have for next week, this will move to Friday, okay? Because on Tuesday we will be out. And actually, probably Friday is too fast, because if we see the building on Tuesday, probably Friday is too soon. But this is today. Since today we already spoke about the building itself, and we have already all the plans basic around the research materials, but really you have all the details in internet, in the government space for the cultural assets or so on. So until Monday, it will be nice that you do all the analysis for the plans. Remind me to give you the 3D model, right? So we can complete with what we see on Tuesday, and then on Friday, yes, you should complete all you have. Probably a PowerPoint, I don't know if it is necessary, but I would better think at least in a very well organized folder, right? With material which is in order. You have the original materials, the analysis you do of facade, floor plans, whatever. And then the actually analysis should be more personal. Just the existing materials, the basic drawings you will use in CAD for your project. So you need to redraw 13 times the 3D model and the drawings, and that should be okay for Friday, so it's not much. Your individual analysis, of course, will be part of your design itself. So let me go back to the, I don't know if I'm clarifying or I'm making you more confused.
Oh, it's fine. Okay.
You want to go home fast. So for the building as a group, you need to collect the originals. We already have the current because you already have photos of what is used there. And then you have to prepare 3D model if you can. So we make it once and you can use it all the time. 3D model, I would use as close as possible to the original. Because I think whatever they did for the Yasukai chip is better to demolish whatever. That's optional, I would do it. Remind me again to come to share the one they did last year, if you can use it, if it is useful, so you need to rip to work. Then the CAD drawings based on the originals, right? And some checks we can do on Monday of the also as close as possible to the original, so you don't need to draw 13 times them. So you can start from them to make your own project, right? So I think this is what you should do by group. And then analysis can be more personal. You can include in your first quarter presentation with your first concept design and so on. Okay.
Okay.
And I think for Friday in a week, and it is enough time to do it, because there's not much mistake, and you are 13 killers, right? Some sleepy killers, whatever. So enough for today. So thank you very much for the question. Any other questions? Yes, you can go home.
Professor,
okay. Yes.
I wanted to ask about the analysis. So when we make a personal analysis, but we're doing it as a group now, aren't we?
Analysis of the site we do as a group. But the building alone, I think it is better you do it on yourselves. I don't mind if you have 13 analysis because I think it's an important exercise. And the building is small enough for you to work on it. And I think you need to have as much involvement as you can with the building. Yeah, this building should be like your boyfriend or girlfriend for the next few months. So you have to be very, very detailed about it. So you have a happy building with you. Are you happy with it for this semester at least? It is easier. Okay.
Yes.
There was any other question? No. Okay. So see you.
We have one.
Yes. Junhyun?
So for 3D model and CAD drawing, we should do it one model and one drawing for together.
Well, so you have a basement, first floor, second floor, roof, 4 elevations, many sections, then the 3D model. So I think there is a lot of work you can divide, right? You can just see, because you will see that when you draw the building, it's not so clear. There's things which are contradictory. You have to work on it.
Right.
Last year we have less students, so it was easier to divide. And I think it was like 3 people working on the model, and then other people just dividing the elevations, the sections, and so on. I think if you have the model, the sections could be obtained from the model, right? You don't need to make them from the beginning, but well, I let you work as you better think. What I think is that only one person doing all things is a lot.
Right.
So, and it's multiplying the work. Some people may work at detail scale, so may have like the more detailed drawing of maybe the windows or the entrance and so on. So if you want to use them in your final renders and or in your elevations, you need to do it very much in a hurry, as people did last year. They found out that 2 weeks before final, they didn't have good drawings, and they started like crazy doing those details and didn't have time to finish. And it's the moment for doing those things. Whatever you think you will need, you prepare now, right? And then you have the base for just knowing what you will demolish, what you will add. So you have very clear base. And even though it's not perfect, we're not perfect, but we have all the same base, so we can compare our works, and we have very consistent element to start working with. Again, I'm not going to start, so consistent and enough to start working with. Okay, now it's correct. Okay, so the idea is not repeating work. And always happens, some people think they did more work than others, but okay, we can compensate building and site analysis, because some analysis of site are easier than others. So you can just, people who work harder with the building maybe have lighter work for the site analysis and so on. But whatever we do, good site analysis and good information of the building is important. And if you prepare the information, only part of it, you become much more familiar with the building itself. And you will analyze it, so on. Okay. So I let you organize yourselves. We have Banchan, Bupanchan, and Bubu Banchan. Then we have a Junghyun as a Bubu Banchan. It's working well. So there's no excuse about not having anybody to help organizing things. Whatever. Thank you so much for staying 45 minutes over time. And have a nice weekend. Have a nice presentation tomorrow, too. And everybody work like crazy. So we will make a great project. Take care. See you on Tuesday. Goodbye.